Okay, so welcome back. What we've got here is if you're AP dual credit psychology, this is unit one. I'm sorry, if you're AP dual credit psychology, this is unit two, lecture seven. And if you're on level psychology, this is the lecture for unit one, lecture two. So we're in unit one, lecture two for on level psych and AP psych. We're in unit two, lecture seven. We're talking about evolutionary psychology, the idea of human nature. So we talked about the nurture, we talked about the DNA, and we talked about how much of an impact that has. And now we're going to talk about the nurture, what you're surrounded, your parents, your socioeconomic standings, all these other things. What sort of an impact does that have moving forward is what we'll take a little bit of a look at, assuming we go forward here. So we're talking about behavioral genetics, and this is the study of the powers and the limits of the DNA and environmental influences of behavior. So again, that 50-50, how much is DNA, how much of it is environment? So every non-genetic influence, from prenatal nutrition to the people and things around us, from did your mom drink alcohol when she was pregnant, or smoke, were you yelled at as a kid, were you held as a kid, what sort of a parent did you have, authoritative, authoritarian, neglectful, whatever. All of these are part of what is referred to as the web of your identity. So again, parental guidance, schools, friendships, your culture, the norms that are part of you, the gender roles. You know, were you as a little girl, were you asked to do the laundry and load the dishes? Or were you also asked to mow the lawn and help dad on the car, or whatever else the case may be? What were societal expectations from you? And again, in what sort of an environment did you grow up on? The idea that women can, in fact, be anything, or were women somewhat more limited in their expectations? You know, when we look at the fact that we've only had one woman nominated to be president of the United States in this country, has a lot to do with Hillary Clinton went to school in the 1960s and 70s, where the idea of a woman going to law school or anything like that was, what are you kidding? You come to school, you get a husband. That's what you're supposed to do. So you don't have as large of a pool of older women to choose from. But as the generations pass on, the pool is going to become bigger and bigger and bigger. And the same thing goes on with people of color. You know, people are, why is always old white guys? Well, because up until about 40, 50 years ago, it was pretty much white guys that had a lot of the advantages. And now that we're seeing the playing field even out in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you're going to have a wider variety of people to choose from. So socioeconomic standings, which is just huge. I mean, when we talk about race and we talk about racism, the really big thing is socioeconomic standings. You know, when we look at a movement like the Black Lives Matter movement, or whatever else the case may be, there is a lot about race, but it's also about, you know, when you have ancestors that were slaves and never built wealth, and it's not that you pass on wealth, or, you know, I'm not inheriting anything from my parents, but my parents were of a time where they could put me into college and didn't think about that. They had that advantage. The exposure to media, the fact of what is this smartphone doing to us as a society? Is it bringing us together? Or is it sort of pushing us around and pushing us away from each other and looking at conspiracy theories? All these things that get into us. Again, the subcultures we're a part of, our religion, education, who are we going to school with, how are we going to school, the age we are, the roles we are, social media, what we do for a living, all of these things come in together and make our individual identity, which has nothing to do with our DNA. Okay, so people are born with certain pre-wired abilities and temperament. So how much does experience really count? Roswick and Kretsch did a very interesting study back in 1987, because they're doing all these studies on rats and pigeons and whatever else. And the problem is you put the rat and they put him in the maze, he finds the cheese, but then you put him back in a little cage. And then what they were starting to realize is that even though the rat was becoming more experienced with the maze, he wasn't necessarily becoming better at the maze, because the rat was sad. He was in jail. And what they noticed was, when these rats were put in these cages, these impoverished environments where it was just me in a cage by myself and water, the brain cells were worse. They were just deteriorating. But then what they discovered is the rats were with other rats, and they had more options for water and food when I wanted food and everything else, their brain basically expanded because their environment became more enriched. They were surrounded by other rats. They were exposed to multiple activities. And again, this is a big argument that we're having in the fall of 2020 about putting kids back in school. Yes, you could learn from home, but is that an impoverished environment? Not meaning that you're poor necessarily, but just meaning that you're alone and you're isolated and everything else, no matter how much this phone can connect you with others. You guys are, your generation is one of the most connected, but also one of the loneliest generations ever. You've got tons of friends, but very few connections, very few connections. So this idea of an enriched environment and being around others, and that's what we have to do to make, that's what we're playing with right now. You know, is the enriched environment worth the possible medical risks? And that's what everybody's juggling right now about as I'm talking in August of 2020. Those rats that lived in a more natural environment, they thrived, had heavier and thicker brain cortexes, which meant more interneural connections. Synapse activity increased by 20%, making more connections. Brain weight increased by 7 to 10%. They just became happier, better, easier to learn rats because they had an enriched environment. So again, just as we're doing, how does the rat learn to get the cheese? We also got to take the environment of the rat we're talking about as well. Okay, so simply looking at a video, you can see rats that were happy and sad. And this, by the way, had a huge impact on zoos. And you know, you go to a zoo back in the 70s, some of the saddest things you ever just saw, a polar bear, just stone and a little Walmart pool and a beach ball. And now you go to a zoo and it looks like Antarctica. You know, it's not perfect, but it's a little bit more natural and it makes them a little bit more happy, temperamental, and easy to deal with. Again, you get on the whole argument of zoos and are they right? Social learning theory comes forward to us by a gentleman named by Albert Bandura, who we'll talk about more when we talk about learning and thinking in the Bobo Doll experiment. But he basically came up with the idea that people learn from one another through observation, okay, imitation, modeling. You learn to be who you are by your parents. You smiled, or you made your parents smile. You liked that, so you did more things to make them smile. You know, they believe who we develop into is greatly influenced on who we are surrounded by and at what time of our lives are we surrounded by these particular factors. And as we age, the people we surround ourselves with are either going to gain or lose influence as we change our priorities and strive towards independence. So there's the personal factors, that's what we know. There's the behavioral factors, what we do, but then there's the environmental factors, norms. You know, is that the right behavior? If I yell at somebody, do other people go, no, man, you shouldn't do that? And then it sort of lowers my behavior. Or if I yell at someone, that's aggressive and it's good, which is why we always have to look for role models. You know, who are the role models at that particular time? And do we see people sort of repeating the behavior of those role models? Now, when you're born, from birth to 5 years age, your parents have a monopoly on you. They are your absolute influence. Your language that you develop, an accent if you have one, is school important or not? Do you have manners? Do you wait your turn? You know, all these sort of things. Are your parents all about immediate gratification? You know, you see the 4-year-old in Target with the phone doing this all the time. Well, that's their normal. You know, what's going to happen when they go to school? And there's even gender differences there. You know, the little girl is told, you know, hey, Sally, wait your turn, be there, wait your turn, be a lady, wait your turn. And the boy is told, run faster, faster, higher, higher, faster, faster, higher, higher. And he's just, you know, becomes a little bit of a spaz, to be honest. So how is he expected to suddenly go to kindergarten and you sit there and wait your turn? He's like, he's supposed to be running. 5 to 12, this is where schools start to have more influence. We start to realize, hey, our parents aren't our only authority figures in the world. There's other people that know things as well. We have to please others. We have to wait our turns. How do I compare it to other students and all these particular things? So 5 to 12, that elementary school and the middle school age, schools are really, really important. And then by the time you become 13 plus, you get to those teen years, it sort of becomes your friends. It sort of becomes your friends. You take a look at parental influence on a child, again, 0 to 5, which is really, really high. Schools become a little important. There's a little bit of a rivalry there. So his friends and others are starting to come up here. And then suddenly right here, adolescence, friends take off, parents go down. And it's strange because our parents, we think our parents were never teenagers. We go to our friends for advice. What classes are you taking? What are you doing about this? Who are you going out with? What are you wearing? Most of us think our parents went from the age of 5 to 25 and there was nothing in between. So we don't talk to them, even though they were a teen as well. Not only were they a teen, they were a teen with a lot of your DNA. And it is applicable, but instead you go with your friends and you're all just as lost as one another. But your friends become very influential on you, whether you drink or smoke, whether vaping, whatever, or whether you play sports or go to drama or study, or go to AP classes. It has a lot more to do with your friends and your friend group than what it has to do with your parents. So there's what's also referred to as gene environment interaction. The fact that the DNA that our parents give us, well, that's that one side of it, but the DNA that I get is also going to influence how I'm treated. Okay, so for example, if I'm born with athletic DNA and I've got athletic parents, they're more likely to play sports with me. If I'm born with intelligent DNA and I have intelligent parents, they're more likely to read to me. If I am born with obese DNA and I have obese parents, are more likely to give me fatty foods, and I'm going to have a little bit less of an active life, a little bit more sedentary. So even identical twins who are going to have better or more similar memories than fraternal twins, they're more likely to be treated identically, especially if the parents dress them the same and everything else. But when the parents don't treat them the same, that's when their personalities evolve to become a little bit more different because they're a little bit more individualized at that point. And nurturing begins in the womb. The first advice we give to a pregnant woman is watch what you eat and don't stress. Because if she experiences stress, baby experiences stress. She eats bad food, baby's getting bad food. So this is where the environment is starting. You get two twins who are born with separate placentas, identical twins, but they just happen to have separate placentas. Then we get identical twins that share the same placenta. Those that share the same placenta are going to have more similar personalities than these two. Even though exact same DNA, their personality is going to be more alike because the first 9 months in that little marinating session, they experienced the same level of hormones, the same level of all these particular things. They experienced it exactly the same, as opposed to these two. Their first 9 months were somewhat in isolation of one another. So they had little variations in the estrogen levels and the testosterone levels and the food levels and all these other things, just a little bit different. Also, when it comes to early development, children, it's very important. Children want to learn, and we'll talk about this down the road when we talk about development, making more neural connections early on. You're going to do more learning from 0 to 5 than any other 5 years of your life. You're starting from blank. But when children are put in an environment that is impoverished, and again, when I say impoverished, I'm not talking money, I'm just talking lack of care and things like that. It's going to be detrimental, and sometimes you'll never get out of it. You take a look at these youngsters here. These were youngsters that were raised in a communist Eastern European, I think it was after the fall of communism, Eastern European orphanage, where parents just sort of left their kids behind. And these kids were put in a crib with a bunch of other kids. And so you'd have a nurse that was responsible for like 20 kids. So she would get to the kid when she could get to the kid. She'd change the kid when she could change the kid. So these kids very early on are learning when I cry, no one's here to take care of me. When this lady comes to take, some nurses, when the lady comes to take care of me, she's here to feed me, but I can't trust that she'll be here later. And it becomes an attachment issue and all these other things. And then they're not exposed to language. Nobody talks to them. So their only form of communication is they babble to this kid who babbles back to them, and they can't learn language. So their Broca area, their Wernicke area, that left side of their brain shuts down. They're like, okay, we're not going to be used for language. Let's help with vision or something, and it's going to rewire. And if you don't use part of your brain, you lose part of your brain. You lose it. So if you don't learn language in the first 12 years, you lose that window of opportunity, which again is all nurture. It's all nurture. So the question becomes, how much credit or blame do parents really deserve? Parents feel pride in the success of children, and they also feel hurt with their failures. The idea of mirror neurons, which we'll talk about down the road, if I haven't already. Little League, toddlers and tiaras. If you've ever seen Little League parents, you'll notice the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. You know, during this COVID-19 scare that's currently happening, this is August of 2020, should I wear a mask, you know, or should I not wear a mask? You see this parent here with their kids, no mask, this parent here with the kid, a mask. And that's what you learn is normal. Do you follow the rules, or are some rules not worth following? And that becomes your normal growing up. You know, if you got a parent who drives 89 miles per hour down 290, and then they get shocked when their child has a speeding ticket, where do you think they got that from? You know, so there is that sort of an influence. The parent can become too bearing or uninvolved, which could lead to a little bit of a rebellion. But if we changed your parents, if your parents changed, and I gave you a new set of parents, would your personality really change? Well, 50% is your DNA. We're not changing that, but just them raising you. And studies basically show the parents typically are 10% of your personality. If I take two kids, I mean, how many times have you been sitting around the family dinner table and you're looking at your brothers and sisters and you're even looking at your parents, you're going, how the hell am I related to any of you people? How are we possibly related? Because there are differences. If you have brothers and sisters, if I took you and randomly took one of your brothers and sisters, just randomly took one of them, and I compared y'all's personality, and I had to take a Myers-Briggs test or whatever, your odds of having a similar personality are the same as if I took you and some random stranger off the street. It's about the same. Okay, two randomly selected strangers are about to have the same personality as you and one of your brothers and sisters. So parents could be a factor, but they're not the only factor. As I mentioned before, if you are the oldest child, your experience as the oldest child, you got brand new parents. So not only you got brand new parents who are treating you with bubble wrap, but they're probably also in a lower socioeconomic standing because they just got out of college or just starting their careers or whatever. You get to be that third, fourth, fifth child. And your personality is going to be different because your parents' attention is divided by 3, 4, or 5. And also they realize that some things weren't worth fighting that they fought with the older kids about. And you learn from the older kids. You watch your older brothers and sisters get in trouble and you go, well, I'm not going to do that. At least I'm not going to do it that way and get caught. So there's that idea of, yes, parents are a factor, but there's also the, you have different parents. You literally have different parents than your own brothers and sisters. Okay, so 50% is genetic, 7 to 10% parenting. What's the rest? All right, your friends, your peer influence, those people that we choose to surround ourselves by. And then friends are such a big deal because your friends, you choose them. So there's more of a pressure of your friends. We tend to become frustrated with our family because we feel we're stuck with them. You know, your mother's always going to be your mother. Your father's always going to be your father, no matter how bad you are. You know, they're always going to be there. But your friends are different. Your friends who are also as lost as you can control you, can put pressure on you. You know, you don't do this, we're not going to be friends anymore. You know, they have that A-bomb that could end your relationship at any time. It's a lot of pressure. I can't do that to my kids. I can't say, take out the trash or I'm not your father anymore. Try it. Keep coming home. But you can't do that. So that's why we tend to be a little bit, you know, less patient with our family because they're always there. They've always been there. But this friend or this new relationship, ooh, my hands are sweaty, my heart's beating, I'm writing the name over and again. That's more pressure. So we're more likely to conform to them because we want to please them. We want to dress like them. We want to use the dialect that they do, all these things. Studies show that a preschooler who has a disdain for food in front of their parents are more likely to eat it in front of their friends because their friends are eating it. A child who hears English spoken with one accent at home and another at school is more likely to go with the one that they hear at school because it's with their friend's culture. You know, I'll hear one of my daughter's friends talking to her in typical teenage speak and then gets on the phone and talks to her parents in Spanish or Vietnamese or whatever else. And it's like there's an amazing accent there. Then when they speak English, no accent. Teens who smoke and drink are more influenced by their peers than their parents' actions. You know, your parents aren't at home right now with bubblegum vape. You know, that's your friends that you're going with there who are just as knuckleheaded as you are. So many focus on friends' approval due to the fact that the relationship is of their choice, and also it's a volatile relationship. It's a temporary relationship. It's a relationship that could end at any time. You could break up. You could not be friends. You could not talk to each other. You know, think of all the. You ever been walking down the hall and there's like a kid that you hung out with in elementary school you don't even make eye contact with anymore? What happened? You know, but your family is always your family. I mean, even if you go to a family reunion every 4 or 5 years with your cousins, you sort of pick right back up. It's your family. So your friends have a lot of influence. Culture, the enduring behaviors, ideas, attitudes, and traditions shared by a large group of people. That's your culture. And our culture is forever changing. You know, we live in a time of Me Too, where women are told, be respected, be proud of yourself, you are not an object and everything else. Yet at the same time, porn availability is greater than it's ever been because of this damn smartphone. So you've got guys who may not have a lot of tolerance or patience for relationships, whereas women are like, I'm supposed to be treated better, but then there's all this video, there's all this TV shows where it's about the objectification of women. By the way, including shows like this, Friends, which you guys tend to like now. He's got 2 kids, one with her, one with somebody else. She's got 6 babies with someone else. They got kids. Who's watching? How often do you see the kids in the film? You know, there's just no repercussions for this stuff. That can influence our culture. The idea of Black Lives Matters versus All Lives Matter, you know, and the arguments that go there, the changes that we're seeing. And by the way, let me just address this one time. I know I've probably addressed it in class already, but the whole idea of Black Lives Matter, this is how you need to think about that. All right, it's this way. You know, because when people go Black Lives Matter, we have all lives matter. Black Lives Matter is not saying that all lives don't matter, but they're specifically saying ours matter. Say that ours matter. It's like this. If one of my kids felt mistreated, unimportant, disrespected, lost within the family, and they were crying and they had anxiety about it, or just frustration and anger, and what's your problem? And if one of my kids said to me, I don't think you love me. I don't think that I'm important. I think you love the other kids more. Should I just say to this kid, I love all of you? Or should I say to this kid, I love you, you're important? And by telling my child, by telling Quincy or Duncan or Teddy or Julia or Tyler or Faith or Austin or any of my in-laws, by me telling Tyler, I love you, you matter, it doesn't mean the other kids matter less. It's just he needs to hear it at that time to validate him. You know, and if I was telling Duncan, you know, Duncan, you are important. You matter. I love you. And one of my other kids comes, what about me? Don't all our lives matter? Of course they do. But shut up and get out of the room. I'm dealing with him right now. All right. That's kind of the big message there, which we're seeing an incredible change in culture because of this. Race can be a factor in a person's culture, but we're more than that. You know, you've got white people who are poor, you've got white people who are rich, you've got Hispanics that are educated and uneducated, you've got blacks that are socially mobile business owners and some that aren't. There's all these varieties, educated, uneducated, single family, adopted, 2 parents, 1 parent, no parents. There's all these different things that can factor into our culture. And many studies point to the socioeconomic classes having a great impact on defining what our culture is, what our importance are, and everything else. Are you part of my tribe, as we mentioned before? Some regions very homogeneous, so the culture is very, very similar, very collective. 99% of people in Japan are Japanese. If I told you to close your eyes and imagine someone who's Japanese, we all pretty much have the same picture. But some are very heterogeneous, where they're diverse. I'm sorry. If I asked you to close your eyes and picture a typical American, what would that be? Who would that be? You know, it could be a wide variety of people. You know, it could be different races and all these other things. So, you know, HISD has 95 native languages spoken within that district alone. And as a result of our culture, sometimes we become more individualism versus collective. Individualism is very American. The nice thing about being an individualistic country is you can be anything you want to be. You can move up, you can go study whatever you want to study. You have the locus of control of you, and you will move everybody forward, which is awesome. It's awesome. I was born into this family, but I can be anything I want. My family lives in Houston, but I can move off to Seattle. You know, changes in lifestyles. Yes, I was born Catholic, but now I want to be Jewish, or whatever the case may be. You can make changes. More freedom of choice, more happiness, but also more stress. What am I going to be when I grow up? What if I chose to be this and it didn't work out? That's my fault. You're more likely to face depression, more likely to have meaningless, to have worse connections with your family because it's all about me, 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 me. And in America, we have a very, very individualistic culture. Do you wear the mask or not wear the mask? Versus other countries who tend to be a little bit more collectivist. There's more of a we mentality where you defer to your elders. You know, my wife sells new homes, and what she has is a lot of different cultures that are multi-generational, where they want two master suites because they want to have the grandparents there with the parents and the kids. You defer to the elders. You focus on being polite. Don't rock the boat. Your last name comes first. You know, less likely to experience a change. You got that caste system for some groups. You can't quite get out of it because they have a fear of becoming westernized, but there's a security that comes with that as well. And then when you see things, again, here you see comparisons between individualism and collectivism. You see the rise in COVID cases over the summer in the United States as the European Union went down. Even though you've got individualistic countries within the European Union, within those countries, there's a sense of collectivism. We're Italians. We're Brits, we're the French, we're the Germans, and they were more likely to come together as opposed to Americans. It's my constitutional right to do what I want. Open it up. It's against the Constitution. No, it's not. No, it's not. You know, when you say government can't make me wear a mask, it's my choice to be my safety. Do you wear a seatbelt? You do. Why? Because it's a law. Because it's for your safety. And if they didn't tell you to do it for your safety, you want to do it in your face or be coming through the windshield. You know, so. But that sort of individualism, that belief of absolute individualism, then we're not dependent on anybody else, and we can't depend on anybody else. I want to assume you're not going to come across on the other side of the road. I want to assume, you know, you stop at the red light. You don't want to stop at the red light. It's my right as an American to drive where I want to drive. It's a red light. You know, some of these things we got to give up. So we got to find that fine line between them. What is a norm? Norm is an understood rule of acceptance and expected behavior, which again has a lot to do with your culture, your car. You know, the fact that if you live in New York City, probably don't have a car, not important. You live in LA, gotta have a car. Houston, gotta have a car. Shoot. I mean, do we encourage people to walk in Houston? No. You're a kid, I can have a ride, I need a ride, I want to ride. We don't encourage walking. We don't have sidewalks in most of the neighborhoods, or at least from one neighborhood to the next one. How we greet people. Do you get in someone's face? Do you get out of their face? Religious involvement. Are you a once a week, or once a holiday, or once every 5 years when things go bad? The gestures that we use. Are you know, put my hands all over the place, or I want to be so expressive. All these nonverbal communication cues that we use. And again, back to the importance of the size of cars. You ever been by like an apartment complex, like a really, really bad apartment complex, but they have amazing cars, and you think to yourself, why would you spend so much money on your car, but not where you live? People are going to see my car. People that don't have a lot of money will spend a lot of money on clothes because you'll see my clothes. You're not going to see my ATM receipt. So it's this idea of putting that sort of norm out there. And again, the buffer zone that we have for other people, changing what is the norm. When you look at the internet, you know, if you told someone back in the 90s, how'd you and your girlfriend meet? Oh, the internet. You know, you don't admit it. But then as we've gone forward and forward and forward, you know, heterosexual couples are more likely to admit it. It's more normal that you meet on the internet, and same-sex couples far more likely, you know, because when you're only 5-6% of the population, you know, you go on the internet and it's everybody like you that you can connect with. You know, there's not that guessing game. Are they gay? Are they straight? You know, heterosexuals don't have that guessing game as much as homosexuals have to deal with. You want to be around your group. The idea of memes. Boy, you guys love memes. But it's basically a piece of information that's passed on from one group to the other group to the other group. And a lot of cultures want to change over time. But as much as we change, we're really kind of the same. You know, all these changes, a lot of the changes that we have are really, really temporary. You know, think about how important the Harlem Shake was when you were in middle school. The ice bucket challenge, you had to do it. Planking, flash mobs, whatever, going viral. But it's there for a second because everybody's got a voice. And as much as we think things have changed, they really kind of stay the same. You guys will have your little celebration. You'll have 80s Day. Look at it. It's 80s Day. That's how everybody dressed in the 80s, right? That's the 80s. No, you think I had this outfit right there? No, I didn't. Maybe those shoes. But no, I didn't have that outfit. This is how people dress in the 80s, right there. Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Could these kids in this picture right here, or could these kids in this picture right here walk the hallways of your high school? And the answer is yeah, they could, quite easily. So is it truly changing? I mean, jeans and a t-shirt are always jeans and a t-shirt. But what we do is we pay attention to the things that define our culture. And they're hip for a while, then they sort of go away. Gender identity. Okay, this is behavior, not genetic. And it's basically the characteristics were biologically or socially influenced by which people define male and female. What is the role of the gender? Is the male supposed to be the earner and the woman is the one who's supposed to do these particular things? So again, this is behavior. It attempts to explain different behavior. Why are men more likely to perceive friendliness as sexual interest? Why are men more likely to initiate sexual relationships? More likely to ask the other person out? Men are more likely to be jealous. Well, this is because we identify as males that we're supposed to do certain male things. And as much as women want to say equal rights and all these other things, they're far less likely to ask someone out on a date because it's not my role. I don't want to be looked at as aggressive because I'm aggressive on slut and all these other things. So the gender that we identify with, regardless of our XY chromosome, you know, somebody born with male chromosomes might identify female and vice versa. Gender typing, the process by which a child becomes aware of their gender, and this acts accordingly with that. You know, if you're dressing a boy in blue and a girl in pink, even though I'm wearing a pink shirt right now. You know, boys are told to play sports, be aggressive. It's the king of the mountain, it ain't the queen of the mountain. Girls are told to be submissive and wait their turn, and as a result, you tend to have boys are more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD. Because they're told at a very young age, don't need to pay attention, run around, beat them up, higher, higher, faster, faster. To girls, wait your turn. Less likely to have attention deficit down the road. Gender schema theory. Children learn about male and female roles in the culture they live. And they adjust to those norms because it's what they're told, it's what they see. They adjust their behavior according to those norms at the earliest ages. And what we tend to see is, especially in elementary schools, where most of the teachers are female, girls have incredible role models. We're the boy role models. When you've got elementary teachers, boys will be boys. Think of how many elementary teachers you had that were males outside each other. And that's where you really need it. That's where the sort of, you're molding the clay in its setting. If you want to be a teacher down the road, you want to be a great teacher, you want to be very, very influential, become an elementary school teacher. You know, because that's when everything's sort of set in place. Are you smart? Can you learn all these other things? By the time you get them, you're set. A monkey could do my job. So many could work this computer. Gender role. And again, this is the expectation of the roles of the genders. Can a woman be a primary wage earner? Yes, but could a guy handle that? He should be able to. My wife makes way more money than I do. Way more money than I do. And that allows me to have this job. I'm more likely to do the dishes. I'm more likely to cook. She's more likely to pay the bills. You know, I get a paycheck, I get a little allowance, I give the rest to her. She pays all the bills. So she's in charge of the budget. She makes more money than I do. I'm in charge of cleaning. I do the laundry because I get an easier schedule to adapt with, and she's terrible at it. She's absolutely brutal at the laundry. It'll sit in the dryer forever. I give her a basket of clothes. It stays there for a week and a half. She's terrible at laundry. So I take care of those particular things. Those are our roles. Now, again, it doesn't make us any less of a man or a woman, you know, but we just take the roles that we're good at. All right. And you're starting to see these changes. You're starting to see these ideas that women don't have to be in that submissive role anymore. The gender roles are changing with Me Too and everything else. And we're starting to see that, especially if you take a look at these graphics. Take a look at the rate that women are going to college versus men. Go back to the 1960s and 70s here, women were far less, 42% versus males, 57%. Now women are more likely to be in college. As a matter of fact, 58% of college campuses versus 41% are men. You've got a lot of college campuses that have scholarships just because if you're a guy, because there's not enough testosterone on the campus. And as a result, women who were behind in bachelor's degrees back in the 80s are now getting more bachelor's degrees than men. When it comes to master's degrees, here's the men, there they are. Here's the women taking over. And then if you get to the doctoral degrees, you go, well, that's the highest. There's going to be more doctors that are men, right? Here's the men doctors, yay. And here they come, 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 boom. And they pass by you. More women are getting PhDs. It's a change. It's a change. It's a good change. It's a healthy change. I mean, the idea that women will be in control of this country when I'm retired, about 10, 20 years are going to take over. I am feeling so secure about that as opposed to men running it. The women, I am so happy about that moving forward. But it's a dramatic change as these expectations are going forward. But even notice my bias there about women. I'm happy that women will be in control of this country because they'll be nurturing and loving. A guy can be nurturing and loving too. All right. So we got to watch out for these gender roles. We got to watch out for these gender biases that we're taking a look at. Okay. More on self-identity. We'll do that before. All right. That should wrap up this unit right here. Any questions, you know how to